think we're going to get started. First of all, thank you so much for coming and making it out in this terrible weather. I want to welcome you all to the fifth session of the NYU Reynolds Social Entrepreneurship in the 21st Century Speaker Series. Today's event is the Food Network, how economics, sustainability, and safety intersect to influence the way we eat. My name is Gabriel Brodbar. I'm the director of the NYU Reynolds Program in Social Entrepreneurship. And for those of you who don't know about us, the NYU Reynolds Program is a program that's cross-university. It's based out of NYU Wagner, and we try to do two things. First is we try to identify graduate and undergraduate pattern-breaking visionaries from across 11 different schools at NYU, give them each $50,000 in scholarship aid, and 2 years of support to help them try to realize what their vision of change is. The second thing we try to do is bring social entrepreneurial resources to the entire university. So we create new classes in social entrepreneurship. We have a wonderful undergraduate social venture business plan competition, and of course, this speaker series. So why do this event? What is the connection between food issues and social entrepreneurship? Well, social entrepreneurship really is about individuals and teams trying to discover new ways to solve some of our most urgent threats. And they do so in a way that tries to attack the root causes of these pretty severe problems. What I want to do is I just want to share a couple of statistics with you that kind of illustrate how serious this current food crisis is. Since January 1st, about 1 billion tons of food have been produced globally. At the same time, just about 1 billion people are considered undernourished. An additional 1.1 billion people are considered overweight, with 345 million of those people being considered obese. While all that's going on, in the last 24 hours, something like 35,600 people died due to lack of food. 85% of those were children under 5. So clearly this is a severe threat that desperately cries out for social entrepreneurial and innovative solutions. Not surprisingly, there's a pretty rich heritage between this issue and the work that the fellows and scholars have done, and Reynolds Program participants, and Reynolds programming. In 2007, Reynolds fellow Josh Levin, who's with us, he's a founder of a great blog called goodeater.org. He's actually in the process of producing a movie that talks about the link between politics and food in Haiti. 2007 Reynolds scholars Annie Myers and Carla Fernandez won a grant from the Sustainability Task Force at NYU to create a program called From Rubbish to Radishes that toured food production and food waste sites around New York City and New York State. Our grand prize winners for our Be a Changemaker Challenge last year were 2 undergraduate students from CAS who founded a company called Cycles. This was Cycles. This is a sort of a green, fresh direct for farmers markets. It was recently purchased by CSA in upstate New York called Violet Hill Farms. And 2008 Reynolds fellow from Wagner, Lauren Servin, who's done some work around farming and social enterprises in the Sudan, and 2009 Reynolds scholar Erica Val from Steinhardt really worked very, very hard to put this a program together, so I do want to thank them. Obviously, none of these efforts have singularly solved this problem, but I do think they're doing a really great job of helping to raise awareness and develop some innovative thinking around this issue. Just a quick word, our moderator for the evening is Mr. Rogan Kersh. He's the Associate Professor of Public Policy and Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at NYU's Wagner School of Public Service. He's been a Robert Wood Johnson Fellow in Health Policy, a Mellon Fellow in the Humanities, and a Luce Scholar. His professional activities include ongoing work with Yale's Rudd Center for Food Policy and Obesity, where he was a distinguished fellow in 2006. And he's really been focusing a lot of his efforts on what he terms as the politics of obesity. There's actually a great video that he put together on this topic on the Wagner website that I very much recommend. So thank you again to all of you for being here. Thank you to our panelists for joining us, and please join me in welcoming Rogan Kersh.
Thanks, Gabe, and I'll add my word of welcome. I've been a geeky academic for my whole professional life, so this is the only time I'll ever get to say, welcome to the Food Network. Like the TV version of the Food Network, we've got bright lights. This is actually being filmed. An attentive audience, and a charming set of remarkable personalities to bring to you tonight. Unlike the Food Network, we've got substantive, engaging topics at hand. The first time I ever did a panel on food, politics, and policy was a dozen years ago in New Haven, and we had about 20 people in the audience. I think it's a testament to the kind of work that the panelists you're about to see here do, and I think a testament to the work that's done here at NYU by particularly colleagues like Marion Nessel, who's here in the back, and lots of others, students and colleagues here in the audience, that this has become a place that attracts an audience that is really the largest I've seen in this room since Nelson Mandela spoke here a few years ago. So a remarkable turnout, and promises to be a terrific evening. I'm not going to introduce the speakers at length. The program you have introduces each of them. I'll just say how thrilled we are to have Gidon Eshel of BARD, Debby Barker of the Center for Food Security, who's standing in for her colleague Andrew Kimbrell, who's taken ill at the last minute. So wonderful, Debbie, to make the trip up. And Dennis Avery of the Hudson Institute. You know the ground rules. They'll each speak for 20 minutes serially. We'll then open it up to you all. If you've got a question, as Dennis Avery is concluding his third of the three presentations, please make your way to one of the two microphones here. I will alternate calling on folks at one of the two mics until we are told the time is up for the evening. I'll just note that this group between them, as I was looking at who was going to be here this evening, has authored more than 500 articles and best-selling books on various topics having to do with food security, the economics of food, sustainability, and so on. They have appeared on a remarkable set of shows, programs, commenting, writing, talking about these extraordinary themes. It's the kind of collective work that gives those of us who've worked in this field for a while, which can sometimes seem, for the reasons Gabe articulated in his comments, a dismal prospect. Folks like this are the reason that give us hope. We'll start with Gidon Eshel.
This work is in collaboration with these two other Israelis from the Weizmann Institute. We've been publishing together for a while. What I want to do today is just, it's not going to be a regular scientific talk. It's not the venue for that. But introduce the problem, at least the way a scientist, a geophysicist think about it. Identify some sensible strategy, at least what I think are sensible strategies, and some solutions. That's the plan, pretty modest. I made this plot. First of all, it's beautiful. I hope you agree with me. But it is one of those rare models that can really get you a lot of mileage understanding environmental problems. So and it's a generic environmental problem. So take a look at the left panel. Imagine that is some kind of a cycle, a geophysical cycle between several reservoirs. I'll give a concrete example momentarily. And imagine, so all those reservoirs exchange matter and energy and so forth. Those are the yellow arrows. Now, introduce at some point an additional flux, unidirectional flux, that's shown in the blue arrow on the left panel. That is an anthropogenic flux. And if that is allowed to remain unbalanced, then of course this original reservoir shrinks, and this original reservoir expands. That is an extremely, however simple, it is an extremely useful way to look at environmental problems. Now, the key problem, I think, of our generation along those lines is that of climate change. Now, in the panel, there are those who will disagree with me, and that's fine. but I still am allowed to think that way. It seems to me that the person that we have in the White House now is probably the best shot we have at trying to resolve that. And of course, we're not really gaining any traction in resolving it. And even in the media, even a liberal columnist like Tom Friedman writes about it, and that's great. And he tells us to basically get rid of our addiction to oil, etc. But this is a satellite photo of his house. Okay. So we need some consistency, which is lacking. Now, if you want, if you subscribe to the notion that greenhouse gases are actually of some geophysical import, then you might want to ask yourself, well, where are greenhouse gases emitted from? What sector of the economy and so forth. So this shows you where it is. Here is agriculture, for example, residential sector, commercial, etc. And this is a calculation that we did in those two papers. And it shows that to feed the average person, if you multiply it by the number of Americans, you get that this is how much of the total national greenhouse gas portfolio agriculture and feeding the nation accounts for. So it seems like not a bad place to start. Okay, and this is a very busy slide. I couldn't conceive of any better way of doing it. So basically, the message I've been trying for a long time in scientific papers and in various op-ed pieces and so forth to drive home is that there's a perfect alignment, almost perfect alignment, between the environmental end of things, between the geophysics of food production and health outcomes. What is good for you is good for the planet, with the important exception of spinach. If you're interested in that, ask me later. But it is true that spinach, well, ask Marion, but I think that we can agree that spinach is good for us, but it's not good for the planet. Okay? So the essence of my work is trying to use mathematical tools to identify nutritional and geophysical diets, diets that are nutritionally and geophysically sound at the same time. And there is a possibility like that. So here, for example, is a paper, let's just say it did not change quite yet the American diet, but its title says it all, a geophysical foundation for an alternative farm policy. Unlike some, I don't think that we have the optimal farm policy in place. Maybe the paper that I think along this line, these lines of thinking that is best known at this point is this one, where we basically showed that you can make a very significant difference in terms of greenhouse gas emissions depending on your dietary choices. And in particular, here is what it takes to feed the person who eats only plants. About 3 tons of CO2 emitted per person per year. This is what the average American looks like, 1.5 tons more. So if you multiply that difference by the number of Americans, you get these expected savings. Again, against the backdrop of all the national portfolio. It's a very, very significant impact. If you want to cut down your greenhouse gases, going plant eater is a very effective way of doing that. Now, there's also land, of course, and here are the various land uses that the country allocates land for. Agriculture and food production as a whole is about half the country, and rangeland alone is 21%. Now take a look at it. Here's New England, just so that you see the relative size. Now you'd think that if a whole half of the nation went to a particular use. There will be a massive deliberation about this and so forth, but in fact, it just happened. Okay? Now, why should we care about it? I mean, this country is pretty big. Why should we care if half of it goes to food production? Well, there are a few important issues that are of a fundamental geophysical characteristic. One of them is the surface radiation budget. Now, of course, everybody knows very well about global warming and about the putative changes that are caused by building up of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But actually, there is also this thing called the sun out there, which plays a key role in Earth climate. And there is no better way to modify the Earth radiative budget than to take it from its take the land from its natural makeup and convert it into row crops. And in a paper in 2009, we showed that actually the U.S. is cooler now by about a whole degree Kelvin than it would have been if it weren't for agriculture. So just taking that conclusion, you would say, well, the more you visit McDonald's and spend on food ostentatiously, the better off you are because you cool the planet. It's not quite that simple. The other main reason to worry about land use is biodiversity. And here you see that 70% of all stressors that cause loss of biodiversity have to do with agriculture. So it's imperative for us to try to minimize our usage of land. Likewise, can be said about biogeochemical cycles, most important of which from the standpoint of food production is nitrogen. And you see right here, this is as a function of time, the amount of nitrogen that is converted from atmospheric nitrogen, which is biologically inert, into something that can be used biologically. And this is the background amount, this height right here, the naturally occurring amount. This is how much we fix today, we being people. So actually, we basically took the nitrogen cycle and called it our own. And the more you eat, and the more you eat in a particular way, the more you exert stress on that system. In other words, the more you contribute to hijacking that cycle. Let's not talk about dead zone mechanism because of time constraints. Let's just bring one last geophysical principle into that, and that is water scarcity. So here's the Hoover Dam, and here is a boy sort of looking at what used to be the mouth of the Colorado River going into Bar, California. And that's what it is. There's no water hitting the ocean there anymore. So water does go into that category as well. Now, this is the crux of my talk. This is from a paper that is currently being reviewed. Let's just say it has not yet been rejected by nature. So what we see here, I gather it's a very busy set of plots. Let's look at the upper thing first, and let me go down here. So here are a series of metrics against which you can compare various parts of the animal-based diet. We wrote a number of papers that say, essentially, if you care about geophysics, eat plants. Well, if people are not going to go vegan all of a sudden, all of us, well, what is it that has to go first? How do we optimize our behavioral modification efforts? That's what this paper addresses. So, for example, let's look at panel A. It addresses land intensity, okay? And you see the 5 major animal-based food staples right there. And the y-axis tells you how many edible calories do you get per unit resource you invested. And here are eggs. There's absolutely no comparison between eggs and anything else. Okay? There are many plant-based foods that are dramatically inferior to eggs in terms of land efficiency. Same thing with reactive nitrogen. That's what NR is. The higher up you are, the worse off you are. Again, the higher up you are, the better off you are. Again, eggs cannot be topped. And beef is always, always, always the worst. So if you want to remember one thing, if you're not going to go vegan and you ask yourself, what can I do? Eat eggs, shun beef. Those are the key findings here. Now, in terms of greenhouse gases, it's actually not that clear. You see, eggs are okay, poultry is even better, and there's not such a huge difference. You probably heard a lot about water inefficiency. Well, actually, when you do the calculation right, here is water efficiency, panel C. You see that there are differences, but here you see beef, poultry, and pork. They're roughly the same. They're not that dramatically worse. Dairy and eggs are by far the best. This gives you the relative efficiency. So, for example, for land, you see you can get 164 times more, or you need, 164 times more land if you're going to eat a given amount of calories from beef as compared to from the average plant, something that has a, like broccoli, let's say. Okay. Now you can ask yourself, can I use those geophysical constraints and feed a very large number of people in ways that will have a geophysically distinct footprint? The answer is yes, very much so. So you see, these are all, each dot here represents a person a year, okay? And this is pure plant diets, and this is the mean American diet. There are thousands of people eating that, and 2,000 and 2,000 eating that. And you see the axes here, along the vertical axis, you see how many pounds of nitrogen such a diet will require. And over here, how much land in terms of acres a year it requires. And you see that there's absolutely no overlap. The plants are so far superior to anything else that there's absolutely no overlap. There is at least the hypothetical possibility that those clouds will kind of overlap each other. But no, there's absolutely nothing in common. Plants are so much more efficient in terms of those two metrics of land and reactive nitrogen. So this is my last slide, and I'm really ahead of the game here. What can you do? Okay. Well, if you read carefully all of our papers, you will conclude, obviously, that you need to eat plants. There's very little choice. But recently, as I showed you in the paper that has those nice, colorful graphs, we started breaking down the monolithic treatment of the animal-based portion and asking which of those is better or which of those is worse. And the corollary of all those calculations is very, very clear. That beef is the absolute worst, and you can do nothing more ostentatious than eat meat in terms of food consumption. Eat beef. Pork is unfortunately almost as bad, not quite as bad. Now, the last thing I want to conclude with is to show you these are efficiencies, right? So you see how eggs tower over everything else. This is what the nation actually avails itself of, okay? Take a look at this. Eggs, midget, eggs, Gulliver, okay? There's a complete disparity between what should be done on geophysical grounds and what is done. And the most glaring example, of course, are eggs. But there are other ones as well, and the most obvious one is beef. It is the worst, the least efficient in any of the metrics that we look at. 5 different metrics of geophysical efficiency, and yet it is the second largest caloric contributor in the nation's diet. So, of course, it can be left to people's own decisions, but people's own decisions are not independent of policies. The policies that we have in place are almost optimal to guarantee the most suboptimal outcome. So we need to change that, and maybe some of those social entrepreneurs will come up with a way of persuading Congress to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We'll hear now from Debby Barker.
Thank you very much to the Reynolds program and to all of the event organizers. As was noted, I am not Andrew Kimbrell, but he wishes he could be here. This is his alma mater, so he was really upset by being ill and not being able to be with you all. But perhaps you can think of me as Andrew Kimbrell in a skirt. Maybe not. He probably wouldn't like that. But in any case, it brings a little maybe yin and yang to the stage, right? So thank you very much. So I think what brings us all here, together, is this evening is this growing awareness and concern that even though we've provided billions of dollars in food aid, even though we've greatly expanded the global economy and global trade, even though we've had amazing technological advances throughout the last few centuries, and even though year after year governments pledge their support to eradicate hunger and poverty, even though we have advanced, supposedly advanced economies and trade agreements, and we've exported our industrial technology agriculture system around the world, including the Green Revolution, we find we have 1 billion hungry people in the world today. And actually the latest statistic that I just looked up was 1.25 actually had risen because of some recent food price increases. And I think we all are here, it's astonishing, it truly is. And how can this be? Obviously something we're doing isn't getting it right. And as we know, the solutions that can help us get there are really complex and very interconnected. And food, I think it's fabulous that the title of this talk recognizes that food is related to economies, to environments. I would also say cultural and societal norms and traditions. And there's not time to cover all of that in this, certainly in my presentation. I've been tasked with, asked to spend most of my time on genetically engineered or GE crops and seeds, and so I'll do that. But also in the process, I wanted to address a myth that I think about organic agriculture, and the myth is that people say it cannot feed the world, and I'm here to offer some other perspectives on it. I think it's really great that the focus this evening is happening under the banner of the social entrepreneurship in the 21st century. Because these days, entrepreneur is usually associated with some kind of technological, we invented a computer, a software system, perhaps some energy technologies. And, it's a lot of kind of a razzle-dazzle kind of entrepreneurship that we seem to respect and uphold today. Yet I think as we move in the future and facing these issues that we have, perhaps we can reconsider our notions of what it means to be an entrepreneur. Instead of giving them the old razzle-dazzle, perhaps we could think of a more kind of humble outlook, if you will, something kind of our back to the future based on ecological principles, principles of nature and society, and things that really result in tangible results of how do we feed the world and keep the planet sustainable for all of us. That's the real razzle-dazzle, and that's what I encourage all of us as individual entrepreneurs and also those participating in the program to consider. In order to get it right, to be effective, dynamic entrepreneur who can contribute to solving these very integrated and very catastrophic problems, I think it's time, and we all realize it's time to maybe question and re-examine some of the things we took for granted to be true. Our society, as you know, is, we're children of the age of reason. Descartes and others from the 17th century who proposed that all would be revealed by logos, or reason. But often, I think this assumption neglects the logos of nature. And many of us who advocate non-chemical, diverse food systems believe that if societies continue to neglect and negate principles of ecology, then we will surely continue to accelerate human and environmental demise. On the other hand, we should note perhaps a precept of enlightenment is a willingness to let go of what we think we know in order to learn new truths and information. And as Albert Einstein said, problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. Yet when it comes to national and international food policy, whether it be Congress looking at the Farm Bill, the World Trade Organization, and the international climate negotiations, it seems that over and over again our proposed solutions are too often based on assumptions of an industrial paradigm that has not solved the issues, and in fact, many would say has further aggravated them. Yet we keep insisting that this is a paradigm that is more modern, that is progressive, and that we should move the way forward. Before I address some of these myths about agriculture, I thought it might be useful to define what is meant by industrial agriculture versus organic or sustainable traditional systems, because actually a lot of folks, we can assume that you're interested in food issues, and perhaps you do know, but I'm always amazed at people who, we want to make sure we're on the same page talking about the same things. People often view organic and sustainable agriculture as being some radical idea, and I propose instead that the introduction of industrial agriculture was actually a radical change in our relationship to food and to nature. Growing food once expressed a more personal relationship between humans, wildlife, and the earth. Successful farming was based on generations of accumulated knowledge and technologies about place, climate, land, soil, water. Over centuries, local farmers developed seeds, they made hybrids, they had integrated pest and water management systems. All of this was just an amazing abundance of knowledge and technology that was local to ecosystems and cultures. And in many parts of the world, in fact, most of the world, still today these systems are practiced. And where they are successfully practiced, as one United Nations Environment Program report observed about such systems in India, it says, in India, peasants grow over 40 different crops on localities that have been cultivated for more than 2,000 years without a drop in yields and have remained free of pests. This kind of small-scale local food communities have successfully sustained millions of people for many centuries. Rather than massive technology and expensive investment capital, people and natural resources, sometimes known as natural capital, are at the heart and center of these systems. In addition to producing food, medicines, they sustain biodiversity, better for maintaining healthy soils, our water resources. Agriculture is a huge use of, it's 70% of freshwater use goes to industrial agriculture. We can talk more about why that is. In contrast to locally based agriculture, traditional agriculture, we've replaced that system, or are replacing, with, instead of local farmers growing food primarily for local communities, we have a highly centralized, highly energy-intensive global system of industrial agriculture, and it's characterized by the following: commercial, quote, high-yielding variety seeds, heavy pesticide and chemical use, heavy usage of synthetic chemical fertilizers, high water usage, monocrops, less diversity, energy-intensive fossil fuel guzzling machines, a transport system in the global food system that it requires massive packaging, refrigeration, and the infrastructure to just build these systems that are transporting our food thousands of miles. And finally, it's characterized by a highly centralized oligarchic economic kind of corporate concentration structure. So we have these two models of food production as examples of ways forward. Perhaps examining some of these myths could enlighten us about the logos of nature and help us decide what is the path forward to true food security and sustainability. So the predominant myth today that, as I said, I was asked to talk about is that GE seeds and crops are needed to feed a hungry planet and also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The truth is, there's a lot of claims that are made about GE crops and that they can sequester carbon dioxide emissions, they have higher yields, nutritional enhancement. But the matter is, after millions of dollars spent over 25 years of research, not a single GE crop has been approved for the climate-ready traits claimed by the industry. Currently, there are no commercially approved GE crops with higher yield potential, nutritional enhancement, drought tolerance, or salt tolerance. Instead, commercialized GE crops incorporate just two traits. The first one is that they are herbicide tolerant, and the second is insect resistance. We'll totally concentrate on the herbicide tolerant crops, excuse me, as they make up 84% of GE crops. And basically what those are, the herbicide tolerant crops are engineered to withstand direct application of an herbicide. In this case, it's glyphosate, also known as Roundup Ready, which is intended to eliminate the nearby weeds. In the US, we've been the earliest adopter, and we have the largest grower. We are the largest grower of GE crops. Over half in the world are grown here. So our experience, I think, is particularly instructive. Here's the record in science-based facts on GE seeds and crops, and this is greatly condensed, but it will give you a snapshot. Claim number one, GE crops reduce pesticide usage. According to a recent report from the US Department of Agriculture, they just found that GM crops, or GE crops, acres in the US used over 26% more pesticides per acre than non-GM conventional crops. This is not even organic, this is other crops that are conventional that use pesticides. GE crops increased pesticide use in the US by 318 million pounds between 1996, when it was first adopted, to 2008. Applications of glyphosate, Roundup Ready, this toxic herbicide on GE crops, has increased worldwide in the last few years, largely because of the development of superweeds, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But the increase is alarming. The rate of application has tripled for cotton, doubled for soybeans, and increased by 30% for corn. So I was talking about superweeds. They're a super problem. Agronomists around the world are really alarmed at this growing epidemic of weeds. At least 10 million acres of cropland in the US and approximately 5 million acres in Brazil and Argentina now have been infested with superweeds. And the thing is, it starts this cycle. The herbicide doesn't get rid of it. You have to use heavier, nastier chemicals. It's a treadmill we can't stay on, in my opinion. Of course, this brings hardships for farmers. The implications in the developing world, if we transfer this technology, I think we can talk about further. But nevertheless, and additionally, it's made the price of glyphosate to increase. It's doubled in the past 2 years. Claim number two is GE crops sequester higher amounts of CO2. This is, because of time, it's a little complicated, but basically GE crops are now saying that the climate-ready crops will not require tilling. You can plow or till or no-till, and that no-till crops actually reduce or allow the soil to sequester more carbon. But actually, again, none of this has been commercialized. It's all in the lab. Secondly, there's been some really interesting new studies that show that the proponents of GE that relied on this, the studies they relied on, only measured carbon sequestration down to about 30 centimeters. And most roots of crops often deposit carbon deeper in the soil. So when you go back and look at the studies of the depths greater than 30 centimeters, there was no difference between till or no-till methods. And again, this really depends on geographies and different soils. You know, sometimes no-till works in places better than other places. Claim number 3 is GE crops will increase yields and reduce hunger by increasing yields. Agribusiness declares that GE crops are a vital solution to hunger. And I guess that depends who's hungry. Are you people, or is it cars or livestock? Because well over half of the crops that we have now for GE are going to livestock and to feed cars. There's a lot of data on this, but I'd also recommend a report called Failure to Yield, which found that studied the US soybean and corn crop yields of GE and found there's not have been an increase in intrinsic yields at all. Perhaps what is most troubling is we have a new era of GE, as I mentioned, as these herbicides become less effective. Now we have, Dow is awaiting USDA approval of corn and soybeans that are resistant to 2,4-D. For those of you who might remember, this is a chemical related to the defoliant agent orange used in the Vietnam War, a known carcinogen and endocrine disruptor. Monsanto and BASF just announced an agreement a few weeks ago to collaborate on the advancement of a dicamba-tolerant GE soybean. This kind of indicates the direction that we're going in. Is this progress or modernity or new thinking? Many of us believe that it's not and that we can do better. I think it's also important to note that when we think of these things, that a rejection of GE or industrial agriculture methods is not an atheism of progress or modernity or technology. Often people say that, you know, you don't believe in being modern if you question technologies. I think that's our role as citizens. We question every technology, whether it be low technology or high technology, and ask who the progress is for and where are we going with it. I think with GE, in our opinion, at the Center for Food Safety and other colleagues, we believe that it's not the way to go forward and that it actually is just an extension of this current industrial system that has failed us, industrial agriculture system that has failed us miserably. However, there's hope. So myth 2 deals with the hope, and I'll be very brief because I just got the 5-minute sign. But the second myth that is very prominent today is that organic agriculture cannot feed a hungry planet. Many people believe that organic agriculture might be good for the planet, yes, and it's healthy and it's very nice, but because we have to intensify our agriculture output, we can't possibly, you know, organic agriculture then is just going to be for the few, and we'll have to just accept some of the harms. I just want to remind folks again, we right now, you know, grow as much food as we ever have on the planet. We could feed everyone on the planet right now, but we don't, and we haven't. So clearly, hunger and poverty is not an issue of just yield. It's an issue of inequity and distribution and all those things that we know. Second, organic agriculture has been successfully feeding the planet now for many centuries. It's still feeding the majority of the world. As I said, about 60% of the world's population is fed off of traditional agriculture systems. And third, we simply cannot continue a highly intensive chemical and energy model of food production given the environmental legacy and social legacy that we have to date. Again, I don't have time, but we know the many statistics on the air, pollution, soil, water, pesticide residue, food safety implications. In any case, to think that we can continue this pesticide and energy treadmill is what Dr. Vananashiva calls really a monoculture of our mind. So we want to break out of that. A few studies show that, in fact, organic systems can have yields equal to, or even in some cases higher than, conventional crops. One of the most interesting things, of course, you're probably all aware of the International Assessment of Agriculture Knowledge, Science, and Technology for Development. It's a mouthful. It was a huge report that came out by the UN agencies and the World Bank, 400 contributing experts from 58 countries, and they concluded simply that the best way to fight global hunger was from returning to ecological sound, low input, low cost farming methods. Another very interesting study that came out recently from UNCTAD and UNEP in 2008 It was a large-scale study on agroecology, and it reviewed 40 projects in 20 African countries. And it's been ongoing since 2000. Results showed benefits for 10.3 million farmers and their families who were in this study. On average, crop yields more than doubled over 3 to 10 years when using organic or near organic practices. So there are many, many studies now we have that show this, and especially it's interesting that in more drought areas or salinated soils that actually organic practices seem to yield better than in kind of healthy soils in some ways. I know that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but and if you want more studies, certainly give them to you. So to wrap up, just to say, as we know, our current global industrial food system is at the center of really most pressing challenge of our age. Global warming, increased hunger, natural resource depletion, of course, critically water. And how we respond will be, of course, a test of our collective humanity. It will require bold, visionary thinking and strategies. Most of all, it will require governments, opinion leaders, civil society, and entrepreneurs to recognize and respond to the reality of people's lives on the ground. Instead of assuming expensive technologies and agriculture inputs are the primary way to address food insecurity, we can go to and provide incentives and policies that transition us toward low-cost, accessible, organic farming methods. These are the visions we need from you all, the entrepreneurs here, and from our entire global community. And I'm just thank you all for being here, and I know that you all are very dedicated to this, and I'm sure working toward this. So you actually are my hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. Our third speaker will be Dennis Avery. Welcome. Are you showing a PowerPoint?
Good evening. It's interesting to be introduced as the radical, but that's what I am. This is a lovely audience. It is a shame that you are not going to like what I have to say. I was up here last year for a big Intelligence Squared debate, and they polled the audience coming in, 23% of them agreed with my viewpoint. When I finished, 22% agreed with it. And I am resigned to the fact that New York will not like this, but I promised Norman Borlaug, who was a valued friend and colleague, that I would keep talking about the importance of high-yield farming as we head for a world with 7, 8, perhaps 9 billion people, and very, very large increase in effective food demand. I'd just like to say that the current food spike is just a preview of coming attractions. We could resolve this one immediately by suspending the federal mandate on corn ethanol and food prices. We have created an artificial scarcity of land as long as this corn ethanol program lasts. But I'm not really here about the past. I'm really going to be here tonight to forecast the future. 40 years. It's hard to go out longer than that. My first prediction is that because we have not had much global warming and are not currently getting global warming, that we probably will not have a radical global warming over the next 3,000 years. 0.2 of a degree net warming between 1940 and 1998. Strong warming from 1915 to 1940 before the CO2. And the computer models were programmed without being told about the Little Ice Age, the medieval warming, the Cold Dark Ages, the Roman warming, the Minoan warming, and 500 others, going back 1 million years, according to a seabed core dug up by Maureen Ramo at Boston College. If we are not going to have to destroy our energy system in order not to emit any human CO2, a tiny percentage of the CO2 that's in the air cycling normally. If we don't destroy the energy system, then the world will be allowed to get rich. I'm predicting in 2050, 7 billion affluent people as opposed to 1.5 billion today. I'm old enough to remember when that was regarded as a good thing. Now we have a more sour outlook on humanity, which I truly don't share. And I guess I'll just finish on the global warming thing by pointing out that the correlation between our temperatures and CO2 is 22%. Now, correlation is not causation, but the lack of correlation is pretty damning. The correlation between our temperature record and sunspots is 79%. And at this moment, we are apparently entering a global cooling that was predicted starting in 2000 by the sunspots. And we've just come through a very severe sunspot minimum. So as with the little ice age, that says cooling. Fortunately, the population explosion is about fizzled out. When I started with the Department of Agriculture years ago, the average woman in the third world had 6.2 births. Today it's 2.6. They've come 80% of the way to population stability, 2.1, in my working lifetime. And I don't know about how long you guys thought that would have taken, but I'm pretty impressed. And so we're faced with the need somehow to feed all of these people or watch while they starve. And our tolerance for watching people starve has not been very great. And I don't think it should be, but not everyone agrees with me. Just to put that in perspective, in 1900, before we discovered nitrogen fertilizer, the world's population was 1.5 billion. That's all we could farm for in 1900. But with nitrogen fertilizer, and that's pretty plentiful as long as you have energy, the air we're breathing here tonight is about 78% nitrogen. As long as we have nitrogen and chemistry and plant breeding, we are feeding 6.5 billion people and hoping to feed 8 billion, although it's going to be a big challenge. So the green revolution, we could say at this moment, is saving 5 billion people from starvation this year. 5 billion people this year will not die because of high-yield agriculture. Now, that's part of the story. About 10 years ago, I estimated, and I admit it was a rough estimate, that the Green Revolution and the ensuing crop technology improvements had saved 7 million square miles of wildlife habitat. That's not acres or hectares, that's 7 million square miles. That's the land area of South America. So the Green Revolution was the biggest humanitarian triumph in all history. And it's also the greatest conservation triumph that humans have ever been part of. It makes the environmental activists hang their heads in shame. Well, I've been overtaken by events. Last year, Stanford University published a study, and they said it wasn't 7 million square miles, it was only 6.6. It wasn't the land area of South America, just the land area of Russia. But they did an additional thing. They estimated how much soil nitrogen would have been gassed off if those additional 6.6 million acres had been plowed, cleared for agriculture. And they said, actually, it's quite a lot. And in fact, it was going to be generated as nitrous oxide, which I think is 1,300 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2. And so they said this plowing would have equaled 1/3 of all the world's industrial emissions since 1850. So if you are concerned about man-made global warming, if you're concerned about saving lives, you need the Green Revolution. If you're concerned about saving wildlife habitat, you need high-yield conservation. And if you are worried about human-emitted greenhouse gases, the last thing you should do is plow more land. You should get higher yields from the land we're already farming. And if you can do that without nitrogen fertilizer and without chemistry and without biotechnology, do it. But nobody has yet. And people are eating now and will be eating tomorrow and the day after that. And if those people aren't fed by the high-yield agriculture, then they will get their food by plowing down what remains of the wildlife habitat on this planet. I don't think that's an outcome we really want to see. Again, the answer is high-yield farming. And I've spent my life in agriculture, grew up on a dairy farm, Department of Agriculture, 9 years as the senior agricultural analyst for the Department of State. Got force-fed a global overview. And organic farming has had a lot of years to prove itself. In fact, the biggest dependence on organic farming in the world today is Africa. Not much green revolution there. And Africa, according to one of the top soil scientists in the world at Columbia University, says Africa is about to turn into a gigantic dust bowl for lack of nitrogen. We had a dust bowl in the 1930s. We had a drought, but we've had similarly urgent droughts since then that didn't cause a dust bowl. The problem was there was no nitrogen left in the soil. It had all been farmed out. And in Africa, they used to have 15 or 20 years of bush fallow, let the acres rest that long before they cropped them again for 2 or 3 years. They're now down in some places to 2 or 3 years of bush fallow, and it's unsustainable. And there's very little water resource there to provide irrigation. We can't intensify that way. And the affluent nations have just committed themselves to a $20 billion facility to make loans for nitrogen fertilizer and seeds for farmers in African countries. There are 10 countries in Africa participating in this. We're also having some real success with seeds. Africa hasn't dared to plant biotech seeds because Europe has muscled them and said we won't give you aid and we won't let any of your products into our borders if you grow biotech crops. So they're not. But the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center in Mexico did an interesting thing. They bred around the biotech. Researcher in Israel said, gee, Roundup-ready corn would be perfect for Africa because it would allow us to kill out the witchweed that infests about 40 million acres over there, and it takes up to the entire corn crop, but often 20 or 50%. With that Roundup Ready, we could just spray a little bit, actually soak the seeds in it, and that would prevent the witchweed from attacking it, and that would at least double African corn yields and massively increase their food security. African countries said no. Maize and Wheat Improvement Center went to the seed industry, said, does anybody have natural protoplasm that is resistant to an existing herbicide? And they found one. They found one. The name is escaping me at the moment. And they spent 10 years breeding the tolerance for that herbicide into African farmers' open pollinated varieties. They're now being planted in Africa, and they are producing more than twice as much corn per acre and a massive increase in food security for those families. We have another interesting development, salt-tolerant tomatoes. Takes time to work these things up. The first studies were done about 8 years ago. They're in commercial development now. The tomatoes are told by their genes to store salt, if any occurs, in their leaves. You can harvest the tomatoes, then you could go back and harvest the leaves. And they're hoping they can empower this characteristic enough that we could actually harvest the tomatoes, desalinate the land as we do it. We're getting a lot of salinated land, particularly in the third world, from very long-term irrigation. 10 million acres a year of prime land. So that's one, I think, sterling potential. We also have nitrogen-efficient crops. And this came out of a laboratory accident at the University of Alberta. They were trying for drought tolerant. And they put their seeds into the greenhouse to grow out, and somebody forgot to tell them to fertilize those seeds. But one plot grew like mad without it. Turned out they had discovered a fundamentally more efficient way for plants to utilize fertilizer. And we now have rapeseed, rice, and wheat. They're working on corn that will produce what we now think of as a full yield with half as much nitrogen. And we do have a so-called dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It is primarily a flood event. It involves all kinds of nitrogen, wild, farm, urban. But we also have 45 other dead zones around the world in less urbanized areas. So this nitrogen thing is not a panacea. We'll probably still have the dead zones. But we will have cut our risk to the environment in half. I think that's kind of significant. This is not the speech that you'd like to hear. It's not the speech you'd prefer to hear. It's just a report from reality. Not what we'd like to do in a wish dream. Not what we'd like to do if we could change everybody's diets. That nasty fact that we evolved as meat eaters keeps tripping over us. Oh, and by the way, a few years ago, the Council for Agricultural Science and Technology analyzed meat consumption and world resources, and they said, isn't that amazing? The meat requires 1.4 times more resources to produce than plants, and it yields 1.4 times the nutritional benefits. And that way we don't have to waste the grasslands. We can continue to pasture the cattle, some of them dairy cattle. And I'm certainly not opposed to eating eggs. I have some chickens myself. But doubling the world's food supply, doubling or tripling the current yields from the world's best farmland, doing it without adding any more prime farmland, that's all gone. The only thing you can add is lousy farmland. And we're already using the fertilizer, the pesticides, and primitive sort of biotechnology. Where do we go next? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Your turn. We do a student survey at the Wagner School every couple years, and one of the complaints from Wagner students is that the panels we put on have speakers who agree with each other too often. That has not been the case this evening. From genetically modified seeds and plants to global warming and its effects to the benefits or lack thereof of meat eating, lots of things to disagree about. Panelists back on stage, I'm going to ask our questioners, I'll flip back and forth, to keep your questions to a question, have a question mark at the end, and to less than a minute. All three panelists have generously agreed to stick around for about a half hour after the event. So if you have a speech to make, or a plea to ask, or a harangue to deliver, please do it then. This is for question and answer to the audience as we go. We'll start on the left.
Hi, I'll start off with a really easy one. I'm not a scientist, and so all of this technical stuff is like way over my head. I don't know, maybe some of the people in the room can relate to that. So I just wonder, like basically none of the bios here talked about what higher education on this panel or what credentials, just in terms of kind of entrepreneurship, like what brought you to the stage where you had the authority that we should listen to you. And I just, one thing that I've wondered, because I've been to a few of these events here at New York University, is what this National Intelligence Medal of Achievement was in 1983. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. I mentioned that I have spent my life in agriculture. I have a degree in agricultural economics. I did spend a long career in the federal government involved with agriculture. I wrote, as it happens, a book some years ago entitled Saving the Planet with Pesticides and Plastic. And the subtitle was The Environmental Triumph of High-Yield Farming. I brought 3 copies with me, which I'll sell for $20 a piece, if anybody has the courage to buy it.
Sorry, I asked academic credentials.
Bachelor's degree and a master's degree.
Of what?
Michigan
All right,
State.
Daniel, hold on until afterwards. Ale, take it on.
First, thank you all panelists for coming. I'm sorry, there's like a. I like to talk basically and ask a question about taking things for granted, and I think the first 2 speakers were talking about how our current system takes a lot for granted, especially, in my opinion, on the political, economical aspect of it. And my question is, how can we still continue to take things for granted in the political, economical framework? Casino capitalism does not work. How can we think ways of reorganizing the society to be more reasonable, as you said, and maybe someday plastic can save the world? I don't know. So how can we reimagine things and not stay on that dated communism versus capitalism, but think of new political economical systems? Thank you.
Sounds like a general question.
Well, I'll give the radical answer to it. You're stuck with a representative republic. People vote, and you're stuck with the votes that they give you. And they are really not keen on you turning it upside down in the hope you can put something back together that will still work.
Totally out of my jurisdiction. I really don't know. I vote like everybody else.
Yeah, it's a long conversation, but I think it's something, again, that we all as thinking people, there's something now. I worked a lot on economic and trade, actually, before I came to the Center for Food Safety more. And just this whole paradigm, and maybe this is what you're alluding to a little bit, is we have today this talk about economic growth, jobs, 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 jobs. And on the one hand, we have that, and we know that the kind of economic growth that we've been doing thus far in societies, I mean, this, sorry, going down probably a whole nother discussion topic, but is an extractive, energy-intensive economy, if you will, and that's what brings economic growth under this system now. And yet, so we have on the one hand the World Trade Organization that is promoting that kind of growth, and we have then, say, supposedly in the international climate negotiations, we're supposed to be reducing our emissions, but the only way to do that is really to stop some of this extractive economy and hyper-economic growth that we have. So we have these kind of 2 paradigms that are warring against each other. And the one that's winning, obviously, is the enforceable economic, say, WTO trade rules, et cetera. And I find it doesn't really matter where you are in the political scope. I mean, whether you're Obama, you're Palin, you're Sarkozy, everyone, growth is the mantra. And I think as societies and voters, we need to help our leaders think about what those paradigms mean and help that shift take place. And unfortunately, I have to disagree. Obama, for example, I I work a lot on the international climate negotiation scene, and I can't tell you how disappointing it's been. His administration has been as blockading, if you will, progress in many of our view as, say, the Bush administration was. So it's really up to our collective energy.
All right.
Thank you so much.
We'll turn now to a card-carrying economist, David.
Hi there, I'm David Alboy. I'm a public economist, very interested in land issues. And so the way I see this is there's basically a problem. I think you all have good points, but there's just a problem that the prices are wrong. So as we saw in the first talk, it looks like water is being overused, land, nitrogen. So isn't just the issue that we just need to put higher prices on land use, water use, carbon emissions, and nitrogen just to reflect the cost that they have on society? And then if organic farming really is more productive, see right now organic farming is more expensive. So even if you say it has higher yields, I'm not convinced because why is it costing more? So maybe we need to even the playing field in terms of having the prices be correct. And do you think then maybe organic could prove themselves? And then people will eat the right amount of meat, eat less meat. We eat a lot of cheap meat right now. So maybe we're overeating on the cheap meat. But then I was a little underwhelmed that I don't know if eating plants is necessarily going to save us from global warming either. So I just think that there should be the right balance. Do you think it's just about achieving the right balance with the right prices? If we could just set that through some magic political system, like having a carbon tax and having a proper sense of the cost of overusing land for taking away from wildlife, do you think that would actually solve the system more or less? Because that's how I see it as an economist.
A few months ago, I sat at a table with Congressman Markey, who introduced the Waxman-Markey bill on limiting CO2 emissions, and the president of Duke Power, and the lady speaking at her end of the table at that moment had been the chairman of the Council of Environmental Quality under President Clinton. And I don't know how aware you guys are of a major breakthrough in oil and gas production called shale gas and shale oil. And it's sweeping the world. I suspect you do know about it. And they were very dismayed at this table that this cheap gas was going to undercut wind power and solar panels even more radically than coal and oil. And her suggestion was, well, let's artificially raise the price of the natural gas. That way lies madness and poverty.
I find it distinctly unpersuasive. The cost of production is a very small contributor to the cost of food, very small. So yeah, it would be nice if things were priced fairly, but even a carbon tax will not achieve that. So in the current system, the cost of food does not reflect how much it costs to produce it. They are completely.
But do you think it should be fixed? So not that the current prices are wrong, but if we could fix the prices and make them higher for those things you're saying we should put greater value on.
King John did that in England back in the King John did that in England. The kings used to fix the prices.
No, we tax the things that cause damage. So that's the idea.
No, I mean what you're saying is the
price
tragedy
rigging
of
is
the
price
commons.
rigging.
I think you agree.
Price rigging is price rigging.
Agree with him.
Yeah, no, I am, but.
All right.
I just want, sorry, can I just say one thing, because this is often said about organic, that it's, so expensive, and so therefore is it really realistic, et cetera. We're sitting here in the US, there's the rest of the world, and they don't, traditional agriculture and most of the places that I go to around the world don't call non-chemical farming that they've been doing for many, many years organic. And it is the most cost-effective. If you're talking about that, the whole point is it's low cost. You don't have to pay for your seeds. You don't have to pay for chemicals. again, a longer conversation. So then in the U.S., as I think you alluded to in your talk, we have the policies and the ways we grow food because of the policies and incentives right now. The subsidy system, for example, not a penny goes to organic. You have a lot of complicated issues associated with that. A lot of subsidies go to industrial agriculture.
This is something we need to address over beer afterwards.
All right.
That's the first thing we've agreed on this evening. Get rid of the subsidies.
Another beer summit. Back over here.
I was going to ask a question about the acknowledged disconnect among the panel, and I think outside of the panel as well. And I wonder how much of it stems from the definition of organic and the definition of the green revolution. And the oversimplifying of those ideas, thereby leaving no room for finding the things that don't work and finding the things that do work, and mitigating the effects without such broad terms. That's it.
Sure.
I actually don't disagree that the green revolution is extremely important. There's no question about it. And it is currently extremely important in the developing world. There's no question about it. It'll be absurd to deny that. What works extremely well in the developing world need not be the solution that works in the developed world, and it isn't. It's not surprising that two such starkly different lifestyles will call for very different solutions. And indeed, they do call for very different solutions.
I absurdly will say that I think the Green Revolution had some quite drastic downsides, and including not addressing hunger as we often think. There are statistics that show actually that during the Green Revolution period, we accounted for the part of the statistics accounted for the great leap in China, for example, that they increased their production. And when you take out China out of that equation, it shows that actually hunger increased in that period by 11%. So, and when you go to the region in India, for example, where the Green Revolution was very intense, you're finding, it's a mess right now. The soils are highly salinated. We have, nitrate poisoning in the whales and things like that. Again, a really long, broad conversation.
No, absolutely. That's true too. It's not an asymptotically stable solution. Yeah. That's correct. But we are not in an asymptotic state. We are trying to keep up with things and with pressures as they present themselves. And it was a very useful stopgap. Woefully suboptimal, yes, but a very useful stopgap.
All right. Over to the gentleman from Notre Dame.
Malcolm Arnold with Ruby Newby. We're taking an educational program that goes down to the villager level and does computer training. And what we want to do is implement sustainability in our educational program through videos that are on computers. What organizations would you recommend that we partner with to do that education and do that training on sustainability issues and localization issues?
Earthcast. Yeah, it's a wonder. Yeah, they have a really informative website. You should check it out.
I'd recommend the Keystone Alliance. It involves agricultural groups, food producers and processors, and environmental groups. Keystone Alliance.
Got one to add?
No.
Good enough? All right. Come back over here. Moving in a quick clip. This is good.
Okay, hi. Thank you again for coming to speak to us. But I was wondering, there was a lot of talking about how the economics and especially the environment issues are logical reasons why we should be careful about what we eat. However, I do believe that as a country, we are food connectors. There is a big foodie culture, but it comes from emotion. It comes from people having memories about food. So it's not. I see them being mutually exclusive as to people being concerned about the environment and eating a certain way versus people who are food lovers. So how do you see bridging those two together so that we're more proactive about being food lovers, but also being concerned about the environment as well, I guess?
Nice question.
We've got a big job to do. We're going to have 30% more people, and they're going to be richer. And We evolved eating meat, and I think we're going to keep on eating meat to the extent we can. It costs more than plant food. So far, people have been willing to pay that price. If it gets more expensive because the resources get scarcer, then fewer people will eat less meat. But right now, economics is not going to get us thin. You guys are going to have to do that. I'm no authority on that.
I don't think eating well, very well even, and eating very parsimoniously in terms of geophysical constraints are antithetical. I think they agree extremely well with each other. And if you go to NYU, all you need to do is go to Mamoun's Falafel and you'll sit. I mean, it is so simple to eat extremely simply and extremely well. You're welcome to come to my house for dinner any day, and you will see. Killer fava beans.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nicole Buckley. My question is actually for Mr. Avery because it's about GMOs. Usually when people think about GMO, they think inherently it's not organic because it's anti-herbicide or pesticide. And I've been thinking a lot recently about what the options are for non-herbicide targeting GMO products. The issue I see right now is that right now under the USDA label, I believe GMOs are included. So if you had a GMO product that was somehow organic, it would still be labeled as non-organic. One example of this, actually, I was at Stanford Business School last week, and some students gave a presentation where it was an incubator class, and 4 of these engineers had come up with a robot, and it would go over a field and target with laser vision anything that's not the plant based on its shape. It was scanning with the laser, and it would just shoot the weeds out. And so that's organic, I believe, but it's GMO. Or no, that's not GMO. But I was thinking, well, what if you took a plant like corn and you genetically engineered it so that it would glow, or so that it was the color red, or so that the robot could actually target it with its laser? That would be organic and GMO. Sorry, this is really long, but my question is, what would the challenges be to removing GMO from the USDA label?
The public has not been real eager about biotech. Anything that changes our traditional food habits or the food habits we've had is, I mean, we wouldn't have pasteurized milk except we had a very nasty epidemic of tuberculosis. And we got the cost factors with lasers and robots as well. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't think we're going to go back to agriculture before 1900. It won't feed enough people.
So in terms of politics, do you see that as being a big challenge and not realistic? Or is there a possibility in the next, say, 2 decades to separate out GMO and organic in terms of how things are labeled in the grocery store?
I think you're going to see a lot of GMO advances coming out of the third world. They're doing some nifty things. They've already done some things with bananas and avocados, pest resistance. And they're doing things now with adding nutrients to traditional foods, like vitamin A.
Debbie,
I just want to clarify as far as labeling. I wasn't sure I understood you, but just to be clear, if something has GMOs or GE, was grown from GE seeds or crops in this country, it can't be labeled as such.
Well, I guess it comes down to right now all GMOs are not organic, and so it hasn't been separated out in terms of legislation, I think.
No, it's that, well, another way of putting it, you cannot label something, I mean, that has GM in it.
That was the choice the environmental movement or the organic movement made. They said, we don't want
it was the choice that the
included.
industry set. The industry has been constantly lobbying because we've been wanting to get labels if consumers care. We're just saying they should have the choice and the right to know whether it's GE elements in that food. But the industry has constantly lobbied against it. It's just probably not going to happen in this country because they're so powerful and they're never going to label it. So, you know, this is a consumer right to know kind of issue. or under organic standards. If something has genetically modified ingredients, then it can't be labeled organic, if that's what.
You see
well,
my point, though, that they're separate things, right?
It involves a really big scientific discussion about the technique of what makes a GMO. So we can talk about that later.
Another conversation over a beer or perhaps a fava bean.
Mr. Avery, I'd also like to buy a copy of your book if I can claim one of the three.
All right, you got one purchaser.
I have 2 questions, if that's okay. If not, I'll save one for later.
Let's do one. Pick your better one.
Okay.
There's a long line.
Okay. My one question is for Mr. Avery, and if biotechnology really is a cure, the one obstacle is that corporations gain access. They develop it and they patent it, and therefore it's not being executed in a pro-poor manner. Do you agree? If you do, how do we overcome this problem?
Well, actually, I don't agree because, as I mentioned, this nitrogen-efficient set of plants came out of an experiment at the University of Alberta. The Chinese are doing massive amounts of biotech research. Africa has got, as I say, some very interesting crop developments that really should have a major contribution to their health and well-being. Monsanto was there early. The nonprofits, the universities, and the UN did nothing. And we were running out of steam on how to get higher yields. Monsanto made a bet, and the bet paid off.
So you don't think that even domestically these corporations could take advantage of new technology, in not just Monsanto, but others?
Monsanto can't come to my farm and make me buy anything. Obama could, but corporations can't make you do things. They can only enable you to do things.
Comment?
Well, again, I just would like to comment on, as far as these crops in Africa, this is what just happens. I hear this over and over again in fora like this, where we say that there are all kinds of things happening in Africa and that they've increased yields with these biotech and genetically engineered crops. And the fact is that all of these things are mainly in the lab now, and we seem to, it's the GE, yam, cassava, the same thing. There were banner headlines for years before this was ever released actually in the field, and it said it was going to do all these things, and it showed that in the labs it had increased yields by all this kind of stuff and pest resistant. And then quietly, years later, when it's tested in many of these places in Africa, it's failed. And we don't hear that banner headline, after the fact of the big hype. The same with the golden rice, which I know you've written about. So, again, this is a whole nother topic, but I just wanted to
And the
point
Center
out
for
that
Food Safety was opposing all of this biotech all the way through, and has helped to put into place a very, very awkward set of rules just to make sure there isn't too much of it.
No, actually, we're opposing the technology if it's failed, and we think, as
You don't know if it's going to fail or not.
Well-
You're opposed to it before it fails.
No, actually, what I just quoted the studies, and I can give you lists of studies that show in the field they've failed. So of course we oppose
Every
that.
technology works
Versus
better
a
in
lot
the
of
lab.
organic, of
Every
course.
technology works better in the lab.
Right.
And we don't know about golden rice in the field yet because we haven't ever yet gotten it through all of these regulatory hurdles.
They haven't ever applied, actually, to do the regulatory hurdles. At least as of 2009, they kept talking about it was the regulatory hurdles that was stopping it. But show me where they've actually applied to do any of the testing for crossbreeding between, how it will respond in the field. Why should they not have to do the same kind of R&D development that you would have for a non-GE crop? I mean, they've never even
Well,
made
they
those
have to do far
applications.
more.
They don't have to do more, but they
They
haven't
have to
made
do
the
far
applications
more.
for
And
GE
it's far
rice.
more expensive and much slower.
The Food Network is turning into Crossfire. Michaela.
Hi, I'm Michaela Holden. I actually grew up on a mid-sized but sustainable farm in Minnesota. And Mr. Avery, you mentioned the fact that we've doubled our food production and significantly increased our yields over the past several decades. And that's important because our population has expanded so much. But I'm curious to know, by using pesticides and herbicides and that sort of thing, at what cost? I know of a few different organic fertilizer companies that exist that have excellent thatch management programs and bug programs or insect management programs that work without polluting the environment, without damaging the soil. And I wonder if it can't move more in that direction. If we can use organic fertilizers and organic pesticide control or pest control programs without using pesticides and other things that pollute our environment.
Anything that works to raise yields, I'm in favor of. In terms of nitrogen, we have a nasty shortage of nitrogen in the soil. As I say, before 1900, there was a flat limit of a 1.5 billion people that could eat on this planet. And now we've got a lot more than that. And if we draw straws, you guys are going to have to draw straws too. Living in New York City isn't going to make you immune. Really, the most inhumane set of possibilities I can imagine. But if you're, the Department of Agriculture a few years ago looked at the availability of nitrogen in the world, particularly of cattle manure, and said we only have 1/3 of what we would need to farm all organically. And that was several years ago. I think the problem is much worse now.
Nitrogen is nitrogen, you know. Biologically available nitrogen couldn't care less if it was produced in a plant or in a cow's rumen. It's the same. So that's the distinction is entirely irrelevant, really. The only thing that is relevant and is extremely relevant is that to generate biologically available nitrogen in a plant using the Haber-Bosch mechanism, you basically it's a vehicle by which you convert fossil fuel into food. That is a very dramatic difference from converting food to food and resulting in producing more food. It is true, however, that we cannot fertilize all that we need with manure. That's a fact. I agree with that 100%.
Thank you. Back to this side. We're running out of time, but I'll keep it going as long as we can.
Hi, my name is Jason. So, Dennis, I have like 28 questions for you, but I can only write so quickly.
You got one.
See me after.
Yeah, I would actually love to see you after with maybe 5 other people and a computer. But
what?
Debbie, I missed your talk, which is unfortunate. I had to take my cousin to Penn Station. He's not from around here. And so my question is actually for you, Gidon, because I only had one question for you, and unfortunately I can't see your face, but that's how it is.
For you.
You were writing about, or on your slide, you had the difference between, thank you, you had the difference between beef, poultry, pork, etc., but you didn't really have them separated by practice. And I've talked to CSA farmers who would swear, you know, like swear to their cows that grass-fed cows don't have as much of an impact, and that there are different practices out there that can...
Yeah, they don't. They are right. They emit 4 times as much methane.
Okay.
4 times as much methane. Methane is 23 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than CO2. So grass-fed is a pie in the sky. First of all, we have very little grass to feed cows. That's number one. But even if we had unlimited pasture, this is stoichiometry. There's nothing you can do about it.
Grass is hard to digest, is the basic problem.
It's not hard to digest. It's simply that if you do it in the absence of oxygen, the end product is methane instead of CO2. That's it. That's the first and second law of thermodynamics. You can't full with them.
So to expand my question to what ultimately I was going to ask, there are various practices out there. And if possible, would it be possible to see other slides where you could separate the meats and the eggs and the poultry based on those different practices? Or is there a place where I could see that?
No, there is not.
There's not?
The reason for that is that there's just not enough information. Yes, there are farmers swearing about a lot of different things, but I would look under the hood very carefully every time they swear. That's not a persuasive enough reason to believe something that they swear. And the fact is that if you outfit a cow with the appropriate apparatus, you see that if she is eating grass, she emits 4 times as much methane. And even if you factor in, yes, she does that, but at the same time, she's not using, let's say, synthetic fertilizer. Okay? If you factor all of it, grass-fed cattle, grass-fed beef is about 1.2 times more resource intensive as compared to commercial. Commercial wins. There's nothing you can do about it that I know. But at the same time, I work on the entire US food production system, of which grass-fed is a trivial fraction.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've actually got a question for Dr. Barker. When we first put seeds into the ground, corn was like the size of my finger and apples were bitter. My question is just like, where does genetically modified and genetic engineering start and selective breeding and just clever manipulation of existing genetic diversity end?
That's for who?
It's you.
Oh, for me. Well, do you want to address that? I mean, are you insinuating, for example, a lot of people say that GE engineering or genetic engineering is the same as, say, making hybrid seeds. It's a completely different technology. Yeah.
Bad,
right.
But we can just more cleverly breed by actually just engineering the genome so that fruits are larger, they make better use of, like, if we can just increase the rate at which photosynthesis occurs, that would dramatically change what agriculture looks like. And I feel like industry, especially the organic movement right now, we just slap a label on things and say, oh, if it's genetically modified for anybody touched anything with gloves on, that's bad. But just as whole-handed as saying, like, organic is never going to work. And I just wanted to know, you seem to be a big proponent of not genetically modified. Where do you stand?
Just because to date, as I said, the kind of, I mean, there's all kinds of promises about it, what it can or could deliver. Again, to date, millions of dollars, a couple of decades of research, and they've come up with basically it to be a plant that withstands the chemical that they also own to apply to that plant or to express that chemical in a plant. That's what, I mean, in some ways, you know, this may sound very cynical, but, you know, first of all, I'm just amazed that again, we don't look to nature. You know, what is wrong with growing food and kind of common sense things? If you go throughout the world to many villages, as I said, who have been doing traditional agriculture, and they have their resources in place, just as the village in India, many villages have been growing for thousands of years. Okay, so, you know, nature works if we let it work and we help it work and we help use our ingenuity as well.
It just won't support the population of New York City.
Well, there's some, so anyway, that's to say that first, but the cynical part too, as well, is I find this over and over in fora like climate negotiations, and when they're like, how do we feed the world, how do we have food security? The truth is that all of these kind of plans and a lot of like the GM technologies, that's what people want as a solution because there's money to be made from it, you know? And if we look for agriculture systems that are simple and are low-cost inputs and are multifunctional and primarily local, where do the big capital investors and all of these commodity speculators go who are now looking to food to put their money into now because mortgages and things like that have gone away and not profitable? So I guess, you know what I mean? I'm talking maybe a different level than, or a different direction than what you asked. But yeah, I just think, you know, we need to stop and truly follow the money. You know, whenever we have some new solution or something, follow the money, follow the patent line. Who's going to benefit from that technology? Who down the line may get seeds for free for the first year, a farmer in a developing company, and then the next year they're hit with how they're going to possibly afford those seeds. GM seeds are 25% more expensive in the US than even conventional seeds. How are they going to support all the chemicals that go on it? I mean, we can go into stories about the suicides in different regions that have converted to GE in developing countries. It's very real. People can't support this system, and they're not making the money. The companies are making the money. So.
This hardy panel has stayed 25 minutes longer than they'd promised to answer questions. We've had questions from everything from new economic systems to robots to swearing farmers. It pains me that there's still 9 of you bravely in line, but what we'll do is for the next few minutes before we disappear to dinner, let the 9 of you get the first crack at running up here and talking to these guys. Let's thank them for an extraordinary evening. And thank you. And Dennis Avery has 2 more books for those who want to sell them. Bye.